Hello and welcome to my Nutrient Nirvana channel, and happy holidays wherever you are in the world. If you're celebrating Easter or a Star Ray or whatever it might be, I hope you're having a fantastic time. If you're new to this channel, by the way, my name is Paul and I'm the owner of a company called Nutrient Nirvana. We sell herbs and supplements, and you can find the link below this video. But this channel is all about encompassing all facets of natural health in terms of prevention and treatment. And so with that in mind, today we're going to be talking to a fascinating and very knowledgeable lady on the subject of homeopathy and lots more besides. So without further ado, let's all welcome Caroline Gaskin to the show. Hello, Caroline.
Hello, so nice to be here.
Thank you. So homeopathy is a fascinating subject, something I know a little bit about, but I want to find out a lot more. So perhaps you could tell us, we'll start off by you telling us how you got into the subject.
Yeah, it's a long journey sometimes. One of the things that you'll often hear me say is homeopathy came and got me, and it rather than me actively going out and getting it. And I really got into it through my son. When I first had my son about 35 years ago, we were going through the whole conversation about whether to vaccinate him or not. You know, it's a big issue for new parents, you know, kind of considering weighing up the pros and the cons. And he was at that time 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months was the vaccine program. So we hadn't entered into that. He had a cold that went straight to a cough, and I was like, oh, you know, my baby's got a cough. And then 2 months later, he had another cold that went to a cough, and I was like, why is he getting these frequent coughs? You know, he's breastfed. It was a natural birth, you know, natural pregnancy. What's happening here? And I went to the doctor, and the doctor wanted to give me a medication with a sedative in it. And immediate knee-jerk reaction, and my partner, you know, we both just said, not drugging our baby. It felt wrong to give him a sedative. And so somebody somewhere, and I wish I could remember who, suggested I went to the local natural health centre to see a homeopath. And she asked me completely different questions to the doctor. She wanted to know all about my son, who he was, how he was compared to other babies, whether he was shy, whether he was warm, whether he was chilly baby, whether he coughed at night, in the day. You know, she wanted to know all these different, as homeopaths, we call these modalities. So how the cough was for him. So that process of being asked in a very different way was fascinating. And she gave us a remedy, and it cleared his cough. And, you know, the rest is history, really. We reached for homeopathy as our first port of call, and very rarely had to go beyond that. And like you know, beyond that, we maybe delved a bit into herbs. Didn't really use much in terms of supplementation, because 35 years ago, we weren't really talking that much about supplements. But we got into organic living, organic food where we could, certainly whole foods. And even that conversation about organic was pretty new 35 years ago. So that's how I got into it, really.
Wonderful. Okay. So when you talk to other people about homeopathy, do you ever get any kind of skepticism at all? Do people kind of reject the idea, or?
I think that's a great question. Many homeopaths, and I would count myself amongst them, are skeptics. You know, I questioned what the doctor was giving or offering me for my baby, and I read the label, you know, and as a kid, I grew up, because I learned to read quite early. I grew up, and I'm also someone who gets bored quite easily. I grew up eating breakfast and reading the label on the cornflakes packet. I grew up reading the Reader's Digest when it plopped through the door. I was fascinated by stories about health, and you realize, you know, as you get into being a practitioner, that you are wired a certain way. So I'm fascinated by health, disease, how we live our lives, the choices that we make. And the conversation around that has grown, you know, hugely as I've become a practitioner, which I've been practicing for many years now. But, you know, it's a growth industry or a growth practice being in practice, you know. And I never would have guessed, you know, when I was younger. And when I found a diary the other day, and I was like, wow, my mind when I was 18 was pretty hardwired a certain way. It was quite critical, and so much growth. I mean, I think teenagers, not to distract, but I think teenagers and toddlers are amongst the most stubborn ages we can be, and they get very fixated on certain ideas.
Mm.
And it's kind of like a security thing, really, you know, being in a gang, thinking the same, moving the same. And it takes quite a lot to, you know, move outside of that, but something will be the trigger for that, you know. And so I've always questioned things. I've always read the label. I've always thought about what's inside things. And, you know, being skeptical, I totally understand it when somebody comes in to see me and starts asking questions. I like it. You know, I like to be able to explain what it is that I do. It slightly makes me laugh when someone comes in to see me a one-to-one and they're skeptical because they've made a decision to come and see me. And I remember once being at a party long time ago. I've got a couple of friends who are medics, mainstream medics, and I was chatting to an oncologist, and he asked me what I did, and I said, "Oh, I'm a homeopath." It was quite early in my career, and we got chatting, and he told me what he did. He said, "I'm the one that dishes out poisons. You're the one that cures." And I was like really
Wow.
shocked by that.
Wow. Yeah.
Still, it kind of makes me feel weird to think about a job and to acknowledge that, you know. And obviously that's a very huge thing to say, but I really was quite shocked, and I saw his sort of depression really about what it was that he perceived he was doing. Whatever
Mm.
we individually think about that. I have many
Mm.
clients obviously who go through chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and I will support them in that process to the best of my ability and work at detox afterwards. You know, and I think one of the biggest misunderstandings is that you have to be in an either or situation when it comes to natural health. You know, you're either natural health, that's your choice, that's all you do. And for many people, they don't realize that you can have a more blended approach. You know, so we can support people, and as I'm sure you do in your work as well. You get people asking, what can I take to mitigate the side effects of this medication? How can I restore afterwards? You know, but they recognize that for them, they need to go through, you know, course of treatment, for instance. So I said a lot there. So just ask me anything, basically.
Well, I suppose a good question to start with really would be, how does homeopathy actually work?
Mhm.
What is homeopathy?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misunderstandings or the biggest things to understand about homeopathy and flower essences that I also work with is that they are much more energetic or vibrational remedies. And by that, or medication, by that I mean that they are very diluted substances, and they um, they are both they're both made in a different way. So this, we can talk about the mechanics of actually making a remedy, but they are vibrational or energetic, and basically are giving a piece of information to the system about how the system should operate. You know, so when someone comes in to see me and they have something like asthma, I'm going to ask, as a homeopath did with my son, all the modalities of their asthma attack to find out how it is for them. And then I'm going to find a remedy, and we have thousands of remedies in our pharmacy. I'm going to find a remedy which, if in its material substance, would manifest those symptoms in somebody who hasn't got asthma. So we're like matching. It's almost like holding a mirror up to the state that someone is in. So the remedy is like a message. It's like a trigger for the system to return to its health, to vibrate at the frequency that it's meant to vibrate at. when you go to see a herbalist, or you use herbs, or you use superfoods, and mainstream medication, you're taking a material substance, and that will make something happen in the system, or it will block an action. It will stop something from happening. And so with that in mind, you need to be conscious that there could be contraindications for the use of that particular substance. And so, just to use a very simple example, if somebody is on blood thinners, things like warfarin, then they shouldn't really be taking a supplement like CoQ10 or a food like grapefruit, because that could contraindicate or antidote the effects of the blood thinner. So there's a lot more precautions with material substances. With energetic medicine, you could also put, breath work, yoga into that bag, because you are stimulating the system to work in a healthy way. And, it's a lot, it can be quite a lot to get your head around the idea of what we call serial dilution of a substance. But the greater we dilute that substance, the deeper its effect. And that is very difficult for material scientists to get their head around.
Yeah. So am I right in saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but am I right in saying that the magical ingredient in a homeopathic remedy is a toxin?
It could be. It could be.
The ailment that you're trying to fix.
It could be. So we definitely have remedies that are made from things like a bee sting, snake venom, something that you wouldn't take in its material form. But we also have remedies made from substances that you might eat in other ways. And we always talk about a very classic example of cut an onion. If you're not wearing contact lenses, you cut an onion and your eyes start to stream, and then your nose starts to stream, and your eyes sting, and they feel really uncomfortable. So I might take that substance, serially dilute it, and give it to somebody who has hay fever with those types of symptoms. Someone else might have hay fever and they're very sneezy. And I ask them when they sneeze, and they say, I sneeze a lot when I'm outdoors, and plants are around. I just can't stop sneezing, and it's a really strong sneeze. And I'll be like, oh, so that remedy made from the onion isn't the right one for you. We need to find another one that matches those symptoms. And I think when I first got into homeopathy, it seemed like this articulate and elegant puzzle. And while I was seeking the healing, I don't think I really acknowledged the power of homeopathy. And it's really quite incredible. I had a family ask me, I prescribed for them. They've come over from Austria to England, and they've picked up their remedies, and they're all in like little vials. Doesn't seem to be very much of it there compared to the big bag of pills you might get from the doctor. And they said to me, have we got everything we need? And I went back and had a look at their prescription and said, yeah, you've definitely got enough for several months here. And they were quite surprised by that. So I guess that's another thing I like to put in, is that homeopathy is lightweight. It doesn't tax the planet. You can put it in your back pocket. You can take it on holiday with you. You can put a lot of information into a very small space and make it highly portable and accessible.
Wow. Okay.
I love that. Wow.
A lot to take in there. Yeah, that's really interesting. So is there literally a homeopathic treatment for every single ailment, or is there a certain situation where it wouldn't be appropriate to use homeopathy?
Did you hear me sigh there? I sighed because there are thousands of remedies and we have many, many solutions. What we are up against as all sorts of practitioners is the rules of the land that we live in, and the protocols of our local hospital, our local health service. And so I have colleagues in India who've worked with thousands and thousands of live, active cancer cases. I could never say that I can prescribe for cancer, even if I have that knowledge.
Definitely not on YouTube, but anyway, carry on.
Exactly. You know, so I'm not saying that I can, but I couldn't say that in the country that I live in, which is the UK, even if I had that knowledge. And there are lots of advanced pathologies that we could work with, and it might be, you know, when I mentioned working with somebody who is going through radiotherapy or chemotherapy, it's often that I'm prescribing for how that person's feeling, you know, so I might be using remedies at that level, or helping them sleep, or helping them with something like sickness, you know, which is a very known side effect of the medication. So, or falling hair, for instance, you know, if we can work with that, if we can keep someone's energy up, if we can keep their vitality up through heavy duty treatments, then they can sustain the treatment. You know, one of the biggest fails is the immune system not being able to survive that type of treatment. And so if you can support someone at that level, and I really like to include like supplements, perhaps refer to a herbalist, kind of things that you're working with, because then we have a holistic approach to very complex pathologies. So I kind of know I've dived straight in with that, but even if somebody comes with a cold, I'm going to say, look, here's the remedy, stock up on your vitamin C, take your honey, lemon, ginger, garlic. All of these are, you know, garlic's a natural antibiotic, really. You know, it's one of the most potent herbs we have in our pharmacy. And, you know, we're talking in the spring, it's all around us at the moment.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so you mentioned hair, Caroline. Do you have any homeopathic remedies for greying hair? I've been going grey now. I'm 49 nearly, so I've been going grey for about 7 or 8 years, and I've tried various things, and I don't know whether it, you know, maybe there's herbs like Hushu Wu, for example, and other things I've tried, and perhaps it's slowed down the greying slightly. I don't know, but is there anything you can help me with on that front?
Yeah, so I think with hair per se, I always, as a rule of thumb, if hair is dry, coarse, we need to put more essential fatty acids into the system. And I'm sure you work with those omegas 369, etc., getting the balance right. And we can do tests now, which I don't know if you provide those, but we can do tests that show which essential fatty acids we're not very good at absorbing. Okay. So this, you know, we're advancing with detection all of the time. So dry hair, we need more fats. Loss of color to the hair is really a loss of mineral wealth. So I would start with something like ionic minerals, which I think we absorb more efficiently than we do nanos, although I'd love to have a conversation about that. So what I find with the ionic minerals like fulvic acid, humic acid, ocean trace minerals, is that they have much more vitality and much more electrolytes in them than the nanos do. That's my experience of prescribing them or giving them to people.
I mean, I've been drinking fulvic minerals now for probably about 15 years at least.
Yeah.
On a daily basis, 7 drops in clean water. And obviously that there's so many health properties involved with that. It's really good for you.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Do you have, can I ask you a question? Actually, I'll talk a bit more about hair in a minute, but do you have Shilajit in your shop?
No, we sell fulvic minerals. The reason for that is that I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that with Shilajit, there's issues with extracting it, and evidently it picks up heavy metals in the extraction. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I love learning that because I've always been quite curious about it, and I did take some on the last cleanse that I did instead of the ionic minerals that I normally do, and I was like, wow, it smells like tar. And it is tar, basically.
And it's a bit inconvenient as well, isn't it? Because you have to really stir it up for it to dissolve in the water, whereas fulvic just drops, you know, so it's much.
Exactly. Oh, it's good to hear you say that. So, and it's interesting that you've gone grey in that time. So in the time that you've been, you know, taking minerals, there's a naturopath, Anne Wigmore. If you come across her, she's
No?
not around anymore, but she turned her grey hair back to brown through taking the green superfoods. So Craxel chlorella, blue-green algae are my favourites. I'm a little bit careful about spirulina because I find some people don't tolerate it well.
Okay.
But I absolutely love those for their chelating capacity, B vitamins, iron, you know, all the things that they're rich in.
That's very interesting. The one I've never really got into those kind of supplements because I've heard that there might be issues with, again, with metal toxicity from the oceans. I don't know how true that is or how relevant that is, but what would you say to that?
I'm a big fan of blue-green algae personally from the Klamath Lake. You will hear all sorts of people talk about toxicity factor with that. I trust the company that I work with, and I go, they're my go-to, and I've taken blue-green algae for coming up, I can't believe this, coming up for 30 years. I started taking it in 1996, and I'm going to tell you how old I am now.
Well, I actually know, and when I found out, my jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. You're looking incredible. So
so I'm nearly 62, and I actually don't have any grey hair yet. So I put that down to homeopathy and blue-green algae, frankly, because those have been my totally consistent things. There are a couple of other things that I utilize for falling hair, and that's different. Falling hair is about protein metabolism in the main. It could be, if your hair's falling, it could be to do with thyroid, you know, like low thyroid. So hypothyroid is often associated with falling hair, particularly if you're losing it at the temples for women, especially. And I work a lot with women's health. But low thyroid shows me that we're not metabolizing protein efficiently. That one of the thyroid's major roles is metabolizing protein. So if we're losing hair is made of protein. We need to look at how efficient the thyroid is, whether it's functioning fully, and we need to look at the things that stand in the way of the thyroid fully functioning. We can talk about that if you want, but falling hair can have slightly different things. So it could be that there's a problem with the actual root of the hair, so not what the hair's made of so much as the how the hair comes out of the head. You know, we can have diseases around that. So it's a whole host of things that could be going wrong. But the vast majority of people that I see are with early hair loss would be around heavy metals and thyroid function. So, you know, those going back to those green superfoods that help us chelate out the heavy metals and provide an array of nutrients to keep the color in the hair would be my advice. Homeopathically, we could use remedies that in their picture we talk about the materia medica of each remedy. So I said there's thousands of remedies. We have around 140, 160 that we call polycrests. These are our major remedies, and you'll find those in your first aid kit. You'll find them as over-the-counter products, very easy to get hold of, very easy to understand how to use them. And each of those remedies will have a good materia medica, we call it, picture of what that remedy is used for. And they'll cover the mental, emotional, the physical, and what we call general symptoms. So early grayness, for instance, or falling hair falls into that category, or an inability to process fatty acids falls into the category of what we homeopaths call general symptoms. And that what we'll be looking for is remedies that have early grayness in their materia medica, in their picture. And there are very few of those, you know, so it kind of gets quite easy to narrow down symptoms sometimes. So yeah, we could anyway pick up on anything else you want to ask me.
Have you experienced anyone that's had hair reversal, grey hair reversal with homeopathy?
Yeah, me.
Oh, really? You did it
Yeah.
yourself?
So
Wow.
I did have some grey hairs coming in. So I've been working with a particular superfood cleanse that is based around several products, but it was the crack cell chlorella in that, because I've been taking blue-green algae for years. It has crack cell chlorella in it. I do the cleanse 3 times a year. The grey hair stopped, you know. And then Anne Wigmore, as I've said, is well documented. If you go and read her, you know, I mean, I think that's incredible. I'm sure there's other people that have reversed their grey hair with superfoods.
Okay.
So just to say, just one last thing I wanted to add is that looking to your amino acid profile and making sure that you are firing on all 8 cylinders of the essential amino acids will help with hair loss, if hair loss is an issue.
Okay, very, very interesting. I've made some notes there. That's brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the thyroid a moment ago, and that leads us on nicely to the menopause.
Yes.
So this is something that I come across a lot in my job. Can you give us some insights into how ladies can manage the menopause naturally without having to use synthetic hormones?
Yeah, thank you. So I work a lot with menopause because I guess this is quite common to practitioners when we go through something ourselves, whether it's experiencing an issue personally or in our practice or in our family. It can become something of a focus. In early 2020, I did a talk at Homes for Haringey in North London, and there were several women there from Afro-Caribbean background, from Middle Eastern background, and Eastern Mediterranean background. And I was one of the few white Caucasian women in the room because of the demographic in Haringey, and also women working in housing, working for the council. And afterwards, I had a lot of women come up, particularly from the Afro-Caribbean community, saying, wow, I didn't know there was any alternatives to HRT. We don't really use that much in our community. And I was like, that's interesting. And then I learned a lot more statistics about menopause and realized that menopause affects women differently across cultures, and that also culturally we might have different ideas about how to approach menopause. And there's an article that's just come out based on studies that shows that in our culture have a very negative view about older women, and yet in other cultures older women are seen as wise, so that entering into the men and wise and have got something to give back to the community, you know. And so entering into menopause, the loss of fertility, this change, you know, can feel really quite daunting, you know. So for me it was like, what am I entering into? And you know, symptoms came up initially to do with low blood sugar, and then as time went on, I had low thyroid. I'd overextended myself. I was working really hard. I wasn't eating regularly enough. And so from that came an acknowledgement that there was work to do. Women didn't all see this period of passage as the same. They didn't experience it the same. And for myself, I went on a journey that showed me that, yes, you can do it naturally, but you do need to attend to it and you do need to have a holistic approach. So, yes, I was using homeopathy. That got me back on track at 42 when my blood sugar was low. But when I got to 46 and I'd overextended myself and my thyroid was low, I needed to see the craniosacral therapist as well as have the homeopathy. I needed to adapt the yoga that I was doing. I eventually did a microbiome test relatively recently and found that I had an overgrowth of particular bacteria that predisposes you to anxiety. And the solution to that was to take ashwagandha every day, which is an adaptogenic herb. So that really helps balance the body at these times of hormonal change, particularly menopause. And there are many other herbs that can help, but for me, that was very helpful. And so as we switch from the ovaries producing estrogen to the adrenal glands producing the estrogen. If we overextend ourselves in that period of time, which I did, then we're going to crash. So a lot of it is learning, and I always say this to women, a lot of it is learning how to add things into your life. I think women are very good at taking things away. I've got to stop doing that in order to get this result. And yet, if we add in essential fatty acids, if we add in transdermal magnesium, if we look after the gut health as an absolute basic, I call that the holy trinity when it comes to foods. And then we start to attend to things like boundaries, we allowing too much into our lives, spending too much time with negative people, all that kind of thing. We can start to look at that as well. And then we can start to add in the superfoods that do a particular targeted job that relates to the symptoms that you're experiencing. There's a lot of information out there about got to do this, and it's like red clover can be amazing for hot flushes. For someone else it might be sage, someone else might not be having hot flushes, so they might not be useful. So it might be more useful to have a calcium rich herb like red raspberry leaf tea, for instance. So there's so many resources, but it is really important to kind of almost list what's going on for you and then find solution.
I love ashwagandha. We sell that. We've got an organic version on our website. I've found on my travels with this topic that maca root is very useful. Dongwei is another one that's had some very impressive results. Black Cohos. My mother, who is, for want of a nicer expression, a normie, I suppose, actually went through her menopause using Black Cohos, and she said that it was fantastic. She had virtually no symptoms. Have you heard that in Japan there is no word for menopause?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, worth looking at culturally. It's the same with like nomadic tribes women. They don't experience it. And I think Japan is a very interesting example, because if we look at, for instance, nomadic tribes women that are perhaps exposed to less environmentally than we are in, the UK, Europe, the developed countries, we might say that, there's a difference of environmental factors. But when you look to Japan, which is hugely toxic, in certain areas, that, new building syndrome, these types of things come out of Japan, and you add in Fukushima and Hiroshima, and, there can be a sense of there is a background, that needs to be detoxed. You're like, okay, so what is it that Japanese women are doing? And it's down to the food, and looking at the use of soya, seaweed. Seaweed's amazingly nutrient dense. Soya can really help as a phytoestrogen. And also they don't eat much dairy. Dairy, if it's not organic, can be really quite detrimental when it comes to things like breast health, liver health, etc.
Does that include unpasteurized dairy?
No, I'm a big fan of unpasteurized.
Good for that,
yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, the vast majority of people, I mean, I read something the other day that I need to complete reading the article about pasteurized and unpasteurized milk. So I was curious about whatever that says. I haven't read it yet. I'll let you know. But yeah, I like to make kefir myself, milk kefir, and if I can get raw to make it from, fantastic, because we're diversifying the gut flora, and so if with a poor gut flora, we just don't function well. So, something like sleep, if we don't have the right gut flora, we're not going to produce melatonin in the pineal gland. And guess what's going to happen? Your sleep's disrupted, which is terrible in menopause for many women.
Yeah, and of course, vitamin D is very important as well for the melatonin production.
Definitely.
Just going back to the Japanese diet, of course, they famously eat lots of sushi, seaweed, seafood, etc. And I think the probably the most important nutrient there would be iodine. And of course, iodine is very important for the thyroid. So that would be my educated guess on that one. Definitely.
Definitely. And I think iodine naturally acquired like that is much better for most people. I don't see a lot of traction personally on a more chemical form of iodine. I really like the seaweeds. You know, red algae can really help with the immune system. The brown algae kelp with the, you know, particularly rich in iodine.
Mm.
You know, this blue and there's green algae and the blue green algae. You know, it's like there we can kind of emphasize things, you know, different conditions. But yeah,
Yeah,
a little bit of seaweed every day.
Yeah, it's always best to get it from food if you can. But I mean, 150 years ago, doctors were prescribing iodine in quite high doses, even if they didn't know what the problem was with the patient. And quite often the problem would just go away.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm a big fan of iodine.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so are there any homeopathic treatments for men? I'm thinking of what was that noise? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I think that was a buzzy motorbike in the background
Oh,
at my end, maybe.
it was a cow or something. I thought you were on a Where's that?
Not as far as I know.
Yeah, where was I? Yeah.
For
Homeopathic
men.
treatments for men. I'm thinking of the prostate, testosterone levels, that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So again, we might have remedies which are we think of as being more female remedies or more male remedies. And you know, prostate is an inflammation of a gland in the main. So we're looking for a remedy to help with glandular inflammation. And I won't sort of drill down to specifics so much as to say, let's understand the process that we have a gland which is holding on to toxicity, holding on and inflaming for some reason. And generally speaking, I would be exploring with a man where there is unspoken anger, disappointment with prostate. We often see the two go hand in hand. So, you know, as homeopaths, we look for what we call the etiology, the causation. When did this start? You know, when I first went to see a homeopath myself, so I talked about my son. When I went to see a homeopath myself, it was when my son was quite young, and I had, because I breastfed him, I quite quickly went back to my pre-pregnancy weight. And as he grew and I continued to feed him, I actually dipped below my pre-pregnancy weight. So I just didn't have that kind of reserve. And I started to kind of go through a bit of identity crisis as well. And I again experienced that kind of blood sugar imbalance. And I must have mentioned something to the homeopath when I was taking my son there. And she said, I think you should come and see me as well. And she asked me how I was feeling, what was going on. And I don't remember what I said, but she said to me, when did you first feel like this? And I said, I felt like this when I was 8. And she said, what happened when you were 8? And I told my story for the first time in my life. And she said, you know, that's not normal, don't you? And I said, no, because we only really have a template that we think is normal. And from that moment, you know, she gave me a remedy and it really kind of got to the bottom of who I was and how I was in the world. And I started to move forward with a different view and to really begin some deep healing. So she recognized something in me, you know, and it was the capacity to feel a bit bleak. I don't know if that's depression, but the capacity to feel bleak. And so that would crop up at various points, and I would maybe have the same remedy again, or I would have a different remedy to just go that little bit deeper. And often we're uncovering those layers. So prostate and men, you know, I'll be asking those questions. When did this start? What does this go back to? And there can be all sorts of causations, but often there's something emotional that's happened to us, a time when we've had to swallow something. You know, that's what I find with glands.
This is very interesting to me because I had something happen to me yesterday. So I had a bit of a disagreement with my mum about something yesterday, a bit of an argument. I have a bit of an up and down relationship with her, and I've had, or I did have, Raynaud's syndrome for about 15 to 20 years. And it gets worse, obviously, in the winter when it's very cold outside. The tips of my fingers turn blue. But this winter, I've not had any attacks at all. And I've put this down to primarily, and this is just my personal experience, I'm not giving medical advice to anyone. I've put it down to 3 things that I take. Magnesium, because as I understand it, the capillaries in your fingers are contracting or spasming, I suppose is the right way of describing it. So magnesium helps everything to relax, obviously. I've been taking iodine once or twice a week, and I've been taking a very good version of organic sulfur, MSM, which is fantastic for circulation. And this winter, nothing. However, I had this disagreement with my mum. I hope she's not watching this. And I got off the phone to her, and it had come back just like that.
Wow.
Within a couple of minutes, it had just come back. And I thought, wow, I'd never really kind of factored in, you know, an emotional or trauma, whatever it might be.
It's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, what I tune into when you say that is that, you know, you're living life fully and vibrantly, and then you have that conflict and you had to withdraw, you know, to withdraw into your core to protect your inner being in that situation. And it might be that you've had to do that many times, or you've had to do that for a long time. And we get into the practice of that kind of reaction, and we do it in other situations as well. So, you know, one of the amazing things about your work and my work is that we're working with people to come into the fullness of who we're meant to be in the world. You know, and I think that's a really interesting thing. So how would I support a client? You know, I would say we'd have that conversation. We would look at remedies, homeopathic remedies that suffer from Raynaud's. How is it for you? And this is just where we differentiate again. We're looking at the modalities of how it is for you. Do your fingers go purple? Do they go white? How long does the feeling take to come back? What sort of situation does it happen in? Is it cold, damp, or is it just a cold day? Factor in the emotion as well. So we look at all those modalities in order to come to a homeopathic remedy. But it might also be, and you just, you know, called something to mind, where I had a client who felt like she went backwards every time she had to get on the phone to family back in the country that she came from. And yet she, you know, she was loyal. She wanted to maintain that relationship. Some people sever that relationship for preservation. She wanted to maintain that relationship. So we created a remedy, I think it was flower essences and a remedy that she took before making the phone call.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we were using remedies prophylactically, preventatively, to say, I'm going into this situation. How can I protect myself? You know, and I take remedies like that when I travel on a plane. I'm like, okay, I want to protect myself against all that excess radiation, you know, the long journey, the economy seats one day. You know, might fly in a longer seat and lay down to sleep, who knows? But, you know, all those things that we're exposed to in the plane, we make a combination remedy so that when we land the other side, you know, we're not spending our whole holiday sleeping and feeling awful. You know, I can think of nothing worse. So let's create a jet lag remedy. Let's create a remedy to look after our tummy while we're in India. Let's travel with a little kit so that when we suffer from something in our travels, we can reach for a solution rather than so many people are terrible gut rot in India or wherever they've traveled. And I'm like, if you took a kit, you could sidestep that. You know, people come back from being away with a homeopathy kit and they say things like, I was the queen of remedies. You know, I dished out remedies to all my friends, and it was the first time I didn't have an upset tummy traveling. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Isn't it strange how so often people go on holiday and they're like, fantastic, I'm here. you get on the plane, and within a few minutes you start to just pour out, you know, with all these mucus and blah blah blah. It's so common. I think that's probably the body's way of saying, great, I'm not at work anymore, it's now time to relax, and out it all comes.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's a great shame to, you know, be in that kind of mindset that that is going to happen. And I meet a lot of people who say, you know, oh, typical, isn't it? And I just think, wow, if you only understood how to support yourself better on a day-to-day basis, maybe did some boundary work around, you know, the boss and the work setting, because we are all very driven, generally speaking, in our culture, and then you had to support yourself with remedies on holiday. It just, yeah, it seems such a shame to put all that effort into going away and then have a bad time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've taken myself. I've taken vitamin D now for about 15 years or so, slightly longer than that. And up until about a month ago, I hadn't had a cold or a purge or whatever you want to call it in all that time. And then about 2 weeks ago, I had something very odd going on where my sinuses were affected. I felt quite lethargic, lacking in energy, just not myself at all, which was very unusual for me. And funnily enough, I read around that time that in this country, they were turning on all over the place something called 4+1 mobile network, if you catch my drift.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now
Wow.
I'm wondering if maybe that was the reason. So would there be any homeopathic remedies for things like that at all?
Yeah, I had a really chilling moment. I'll just quickly relay. I was visiting a friend in Plymouth about, I have to look the actual date up. I believe it was in July, and I was unaccountably sick that night. I'm not someone who vomits easily. I was sick as a dog, and I was like, didn't really eat anything weird, you know, I just couldn't understand it. And I felt a bit rotten, and I was going to go and see some other friends the next day. So I chose to go and stay in a hotel for the night, because I thought, I don't want to visit my friends if I'm coming down with something, the other friends. And I don't know what's going on. Anyway, it was right as rain after 24 hours, probably took some homeopathy. Ages and ages and ages later, I spoke to, you know, like 18 months later, I spoke to someone in Jersey who told me that they changed the
network.
G network, and that he'd had a lot of friends with headaches, a lot of dogs being sick, a lot of, you know, a lot of all around him. And it's suddenly this, I suddenly remembered being really sick, which is, let's just say, it's completely unusual for me. I went and looked in the local paper for Plymouth. That was the exact day, just happened to be there. And I was just like, like you, I was a bit gobsmacked, you know. So yeah, I, you know, if we've got a sleep problem, I'd say switch the Wi-Fi off at night. We can use various things to protect ourselves. I do see a lot of jet lag type remedies come up. I don't know if you've spoken to anyone who uses a bioresonance program, but I use a bioresonance type program for my work. And I see a lot of jet lag type combinations come up for people. So you get those symptoms. If you're exposed to excess radiation, you get tiredness, you get exhaustion, you might get nausea and vomiting. You can get some skin symptoms. So there are some commonalities about the kind of symptoms that you get if exposed to high levels of radiation. So we can use remedies in that protective way. I also like flower essences. For many people, flower essences are almost easier than homeopathy, because they can sort of say what it does on the bottle a little bit more easily in this country. So you go to the Australian bush flower essences and you can get electro essence. That protects you against waveform radiation of some sort. You might use it out in the sun. You might use it if you're, you know, in a recording studio all day and you know you're being exposed to a lot of, you know, EMR, etc. So there are lots of solutions. Funnily, I was having a conversation earlier with a Polish friend, and he, as a young child, was there when Chernobyl blew up and passed over Poland. Obviously, they lined up all the school children. They gave them iodine to dampen the effects of radiation. But iodine is fantastic protection for the thyroid, which is the most damaged organ by radiation. So, you know, I've said a lot there. It's like, yeah, you can do all these things. I flew 3 times during the whole kind of COVID scenario. Each time I came home and sort of a few days later, I basically got COVID from that close proximity to lots of people who was probably sneezing and coughing, or I got those symptoms, and I thought, I've had enough of this. And so I created a spray with homeopathic remedies in it and flower essences, and I used that to travel because I just thought, I'm over this. I'm over picking up other people's stuff too easily, because there are a lot of bugs around, you know, for whatever reasons. We can look into that, and you hear lots of conversation around that. But we can protect ourselves. You know, I encourage my clients to take a weekly remedy that's like around immune support through the winter months. I take that if I fly. I take that if I go on the busy tube. You know, I just like to think about trying to protect myself from whatever is coming. You know, in the same way that someone who's nervous about doing an audition might take a homeopathic remedy because they're nervous and they want to, you know, feel better going into that space.
Fascinating. Caroline, I could talk to you or listen to you all day long. You're fascinating. I've just clocked the time though. So I've got one more question. One of the most common problems that I come up against with clients is depression. So supposing somebody goes down the allopathic road of, you know, taking the usual business, and after a while they want to sort of wean themselves off it, what would be the homeopathic kind of approach to that problem?
Yeah, I think we need to look at, if someone's going to wean off, you know, their medication, definitely consult your doctor. So we could have anyone listening, you know, consult your doctor about the process of weaning off, because you do need to do it slowly over a period of time, because what you don't want is a kind of bounce back of symptoms. And then we can look at all our array of superfoods, herbs, and homeopathy for a solution which helps us detox. So one of the biggest remedies in our pharmacy, and you know, these are the polycrest remedies I talked about earlier. So we have this group of around 140 remedies we commonly use. One is called Nux vomica, and the other one, interestingly, you almost mentioned sulfur. So I might make a little detox protocol out of 2 very simple remedies like that. We might use a more complex combination of remedies to help detox from the drug side effects. And then we're going to talk about the depression itself, and we want to come up with a remedy for the depression, for what happened back then and why, and how we can support that person. And so sometimes people come and it's actually really anxiety, you know, that we're dealing with. So we'll be looking at our anxiety remedies. It might be performance anxiety. It might be anxiety, you know, performance anxiety. I used to call it wardrobe crisis. You know, what shall I wear? And go through 4 or 5 outfits. You know, really that is performance anxiety. How are you going to enter the world? You know, are you anxious when you go to the doctor? Are you anxious when you wake up in the morning? All of these we'll be looking at specific remedies for, and we might be looking at how our cortisol levels are in the body as some way of, you know, balancing those as well. Depression obviously can have many roots, you know, sadness, grief, loss, disappointment, being let down, humiliation. You know, all of these can be what we call causations. And so we're looking for, how is it for that person? What is it? And, you know, it's chances are if you're coming off a big medication, you're going to have a remedy for how you feel, how it happened, and remedies around that kind of detox protocol. It might be that as you come off the medication, you get a physical craving for certain foods, and that will be your body trying to put back what the drug has taken out. So, you know, as an example, the birth control pill depletes us of B vitamins. So you might encourage a woman to take some of those green superfoods if she is coming off the birth control pill. You might encourage her to take an iodine-rich food because the birth control pill disrupts the thyroid. You know, so there's ways of. So the other one that I was thinking about when you were talking about Raynaud's was CoQ10. I call that, I call that the antioxidant that gets to the parts others don't.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic for those nerve-rich endings in the body, like, you know, the gum, really good for smokers, the fingertips, etc. And so, you know, we would then be adding in the homeopathic remedy appropriate and maybe looking at some of those superfoods.
Caroline, you're a wealth of knowledge. This has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed this. Where can the viewers find out more about you and get in touch?
So thank you. I've really enjoyed that too. It's always good to ramble around talking about these things.
Definitely.
And just hopefully share a little opening for your listeners, you know, that it's like there are so many solutions out there, and I really encourage you to, you know, to seek solution for your pain point. So people can find me, carolinegaskin.co.uk is my website. I'm on Instagram as the _menopause_homeopath. I have a little Facebook group for, well, a rapidly growing Facebook group actually for menopause, natural menopause solutions. And I'm also I'm in training, I'm about to create a podcast around menopause. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
That's me.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with me and my viewers today. I've really enjoyed that. Please like, share and subscribe, everyone, and I'll be back soon with another video. Cheers, Caroline. Thank you so much.
Bye.